Throughout Earth's history, life has taken on strange and fascinating forms. Long before dinosaurs appeared, their lesser-known but equally interesting ancestors fought for survival during the Paleozoic Era. This era gave rise to bizarre creatures with unusual body shapes that seem almost unimaginable today. However, it all came to a sudden end due to the most devastating extinction event in Earth's history, wiping out most marine and land species. Despite this catastrophe, a few resilient creatures survived, paving the way for the Mesozoic Era, which became the age of the dinosaurs. But everything changed in an instant, and the dinosaurs vanished forever. What came before the dinosaurs, and how did they conquer every corner of the planet? Join us as we explore the incredible story of the rise and fall of some of Earth's most successful creatures, from their ancient ancestors to their ultimate extinction. The Mesozoic Era, lasting an incredible 186 million years, was one of the most thrilling times in Earth's history. It was a period of jaw-dropping changes and amazing survival stories, especially for dinosaurs, who ruled the planet during this time. The Earth went through big climate changes that shaped the land and the creatures that lived on it. Scientists have split this era into three main periods: the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous, each with its special environment that played an important role in the growth of dinosaurs. The Triassic period started the Mesozoic Era. During this time, all the continents were joined together into one huge landmass called Pangaea. The weather was mostly very hot and dry, turning much of the land into vast deserts. Life faced harsh conditions, but it found a way to survive. Early dinosaurs, along with other reptiles, began to appear, learning to live in these tough environments. These creatures set the stage for the age of giant rulers. As the Mesozoic moved into the Jurassic period, Pangaea began to break apart, changing everything. This split created shallow seas and a wetter, more humid climate. The deserts turned into green jungles and plains. Plants grew rapidly, forming thick forests that became the perfect home for massive plant-eating dinosaurs like Brachiosaurus and Diplodocus. These gentle giants wandered through lush lands, while meat-eating dinosaurs like Allosaurus followed them. A variety of habitats appeared, allowing life to grow and change in amazing ways. The big changes in weather during the Mesozoic happened because of strong natural forces. Volcanic eruptions, shifts in sea levels, and even small changes in Earth's orbit played a part. For example, when Pangaea broke apart, intense volcanic activity released huge amounts of carbon dioxide, causing periods of global warming. These warm times were followed by cooler phases as plants and oceans absorbed greenhouse gases. This constant cycle of warming and cooling shaped the planet's ecosystems and the creatures living in them. The Cretaceous period, the last part of the Mesozoic, brought even bigger changes. Volcanoes became more active and rising sea levels flooded low areas, making the climate warmer. During this time, flowering plants appeared and spread quickly across the planet. These plants became a new food source for plant-eating dinosaurs like Hadrosaurus, triggering new changes in evolution. As life adjusted to these changes, the world became more varied and full of life than ever before. Volcanic eruptions weren't just destructive, they also helped life grow. Along with releasing carbon dioxide into the air, these eruptions spread ash full of nutrients over the land. This ash made the soil rich, leading to explosive plant growth and creating fertile habitats. Fossils found in places like the Yixian and Jahal biotas in China show how volcanic activity helped plants and animals evolve. These fossils tell an amazing story of how fertile lands led to a burst of life. Throughout the Mesozoic era, dinosaurs showed they were experts at adapting. Whether surviving the hot deserts of the Triassic, thriving in the green forests of the Jurassic, or evolving alongside flowering plants in the Cretaceous, these creatures showed incredible flexibility. Their ability to adjust to changing environments made them the dominant life forms on Earth for millions of years. Although their rule eventually ended, the legacy of dinosaurs lives on, fascinating us through their fossils and the secrets they left behind. The theropods were some of the most fierce and skillful hunters in the dinosaur world, thriving as one of the most successful and varied groups of dinosaurs. Recent discoveries have uncovered fascinating details about their journey through evolution, revealing how they adapted to different environments and developed complex behaviors to survive. Their story begins with small, quick hunters. Early theropods, like Coelophysis, were slender, with hollow bones that made them light and fast. They had sharp, saw-edged teeth, perfect for catching and tearing prey. A major turning point in their evolution was the development of feathers. Interestingly, these feathers weren't originally for flying. Instead, they likely helped regulate body temperature, keeping them warm or cool as needed. As time passed, theropods evolved into many shapes and sizes, filling a wide range of ecological roles. One of the most intriguing parts of their evolution was the transformation from small feathered dinosaurs to enormous predators. By the late Cretaceous period, towering giants like Allosaurus and the iconic Tyrannosaurus rex ruled the prehistoric landscapes. Fossil evidence tells us that theropods may have been more social than we once thought. Tracks and skeletons suggest some species worked together in groups, possibly to hunt larger prey. For example, the discovery of several fossils of Deinonychus in one place hints at cooperative hunting, where teamwork gave them an edge in taking down bigger and stronger animals. Among the theropods, the Tyrannosaurus rex stands out not just for its massive size, but for its remarkable hunting skills. With an incredibly powerful bite, sharp senses, and a sturdy muscular build, Tyrannosaurus rex was perfectly designed to dominate its surroundings. Studies of its brain suggest it had extraordinary sensory abilities, including an exceptional sense of smell and keen eyesight. Discoveries in Patagonia have shed light on the wide variety of theropods that live there, revealing a rich diversity in their evolution. Fossils found in this region, including those of Megaraptor and Unenlagia, show how theropods adapted to different environments and thrived throughout the late Cretaceous period. This evidence highlights their success as predators and their ability to evolve in various ways. The evolutionary journey of theropods culminated in their transformation into birds, with feathered dinosaurs like Archaeopteryx bridging the gap between the massive non-flying theropods and the birds we know today. But we'll explore that connection more later. Now, let's turn to the sauropods, the true giants of the dinosaur world. These massive herbivores, known for their enormous size and long necks, dominated the landscapes of the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. Dinosaurs like Argentinosaurus and Brachiosaurus were some of the largest creatures to ever walk the Earth, with some reaching weights of over 88,000 pounds, several times heavier than any land animal alive today. Their evolution shows a quick rise in body size early on, followed by a plateau once they reach their maximum size. The secret behind their immense size lies in their unique growth patterns and bodily adaptations. Studies of their bones reveal they grew rapidly, reaching enormous sizes in just a few decades. This rapid growth was made possible by their highly efficient respiratory system, which included air sacs that lightened their overall weight while still supporting their giant bodies. To sustain such enormous sizes, sauropods needed to consume vast amounts of food. They were well adapted for this task, with long necks that enabled them to graze on vegetation from both high and low up in the trees and down on the ground, all without moving their heavy bodies too often. Different species developed different snout shapes and tooth structures, which allowed them to eat a wide variety of plants, from ferns to conifers. Despite their enormous size, they were surprisingly agile. Modern biomechanical models suggest that their limb structure and muscle distribution helped them move efficiently. Their thick, pillar-like legs were perfect for supporting their massive weight, and their long tails helped keep them balanced. these adaptations allowed them to travel great distances in search of food and water. Sauropods play a crucial role in their ecosystems. Their feeding habits influence the growth of plants, and their giant bodies likely shape the landscape, creating paths through forests and other environments. Thanks to modern technology, we can now visualize and understand the biology of these ancient giants in more detail than ever before. Using tools like CT scans and 3D modeling, paleontologists can reconstruct the internal structures of these dinosaurs, gaining insight into their biology and behaviors. The evolutionary history of sauropods is a remarkable example of natural selection and adaptation. But how did these giant creatures move? The way dinosaurs moved has gone through incredible changes over millions of years. Starting with small cat-sized creatures that walked on two legs, dinosaurs eventually grew into massive giants like the T-Rex, and later evolved into the birds we see today. This fascinating transformation has been uncovered through groundbreaking research using advanced 3D biomechanical models. Scientists from the Royal Veterinary College and the Museum für Naturkunde in Berlin used 13 three-dimensional models to study the movements of various dinosaurs, focusing on the role of 35 leg muscles across a time span of nearly 23 million years. Their findings reveal something surprising. The way early dinosaurs moved was more like mammals, such as humans, than modern birds. In the beginning, early dinosaurs relied heavily on their hip muscles for walking, similar to how crocodiles move today. However, as dinosaurs, particularly theropods, evolved, they started using their knee muscles more, a movement style that is common in birds now. This shift marked a significant change in how these ancient creatures got around. One of the most fascinating discoveries was how theropods like Allosaurus adapted during the early Jurassic period. These large predators developed more flexible leg joints, which might have helped them hunt bigger prey. Unlike a gradual evolution toward bird-like movement, this was a unique stage of specialization in dinosaur locomotion. To uncover these insights, researchers used advanced technology to scan dinosaur fossils and create detailed 3D models. They then reconstructed the muscles based on fossil evidence to simulate how these creatures walked. Professor John Hutchinson, a pioneer in evolutionary biomechanics, described this study as a major milestone, combining over 25 years of work. By studying 13 key dinosaur species in detail, scientists have opened new doors to understanding how their muscles and movements evolved. One of the most exciting discoveries in paleontology over the past few decades has been the fossils of feathered dinosaurs. These incredible finds have completely reshaped how we understand biology and evolution, revealing a fascinating link between ancient dinosaurs and modern birds. Scientists have uncovered evidence of feathers in numerous dinosaur species, showing that these structures played a key role in bridging the gap between dinosaurs and birds. Among the most remarkable discoveries are 125-million-year-old feathers from Sinornithosaurus, a small bird-like dinosaur, and early bird species such as Confucius ornis. Additionally, a 50-million-year-old fossilized feather found in the United States has offered further clues about the origins of feathers. Recently, researchers from University College Cork in Ireland made a groundbreaking breakthrough. Using advanced X-ray and infrared light technology, a team led by Dr. Tiffany Slater and Professor Maria Magnum detected traces of ancient proteins in these feathers. Their findings revealed that the feathers of Sinornithosaurus were rich in beta proteins, which are also abundant in the feathers of modern birds. This discovery is significant because it proves that the chemical composition of feathers we see today existed in ancient feathers far earlier than scientists previously thought. Dr. Slater explained that this study sheds new light on how feathers evolved, showing that their unique chemistry developed much earlier in evolutionary history than once believed. Modern bird feathers are rich in beta proteins, which make them strong and flexible enough for flight. Interestingly, scientists have discovered that the feathers of dinosaurs also contain these beta proteins. This suggests that ancient dinosaurs had feathers suited for a wide range of purposes, such as keeping warm, attracting mates through display, and possibly even gliding or flying. A recent study by a team from University College Cork, UCC, has shed new light on a long-debated question. Can the proteins in feathers survive for millions of years? Their research revealed that while some fossil feathers still contained remnants of beta proteins, others had suffered damage and lost their original structure during the fossilization process. This discovery helps explain why earlier studies of dinosaur feathers primarily found alpha proteins, which led to misleading conclusions. Professor Magnum from the team highlighted an important point. Even though traces of ancient biomolecules can survive for millions of years, fossils cannot be read at face value. The fossilization process alters even the best preserved tissues. To uncover the hidden stories of these fossils, the team is developing advanced tools to better understand the chemical changes that occur over time. The evolution of feathers was a key factor in the transformation of dinosaurs into birds capable of flight. What began as simple hair-like filaments gradually developed into sophisticated flight feathers with asymmetric shapes designed for better aerodynamics. A prime example of this transition is Archaeopteryx, often called the first bird. This fascinating creature had feathers that combined the features of both birds and reptiles. Its feathers, much like those of modern birds, provided the lift and control needed for flying, showing how evolution shaped creatures from ground-dwelling dinosaurs into the ancestors of today's avian species. Dinosaurs were not just part of their ancient world, they shaped it in many important ways. These old giants affected everything around them, from the plants that grew to the animals that lived nearby. By looking at how dinosaurs interacted with other species in their surroundings, we can learn how they changed prehistoric landscapes into the ecosystems we study today. Take the giant sauropods, for example, the long-necked plant eaters that stood taller than the trees. Their eating habits, which involved pulling leaves and branches from tall trees, played a big part in shaping ancient forests. These huge creatures ate all the time, crushing plants as they moved, which led to tougher and more durable vegetation. Their constant grazing also helped spread low-growing plants, creating a variety of smaller plants close to the ground. On top of that, their massive size and movements changed the land itself, pressing down soil in some areas while loosening it in others. This changed how water flowed and created small, unique habitats. But that's not all. The large amounts of plants they ate eventually returned to the earth as manure filled with nutrients. This natural fertilizer made the soil richer, helping plants grow and boosting the health of the entire ecosystem. Meanwhile, the theropods, meat-eating dinosaurs like the Tyrannosaurus rex, were more than just hunters. By preying on plant-eating dinosaurs, they influenced where these animals went and how they acted. This careful balance between hunters and prey ensured that no single species took over the ecosystem, allowing plants to recover and keeping everything in harmony. In response, herbivores developed ways to survive, such as traveling in groups to avoid being eaten. Dinosaurs also changed their environments in ways that helped not just themselves, but other species too. For example, some dinosaurs dug burrows that could provide safe homes for smaller animals and insects. Dinosaurs didn't live alone. They shared their world with early mammals, reptiles, and bugs. These interactions often led to coevolution, where changes in one species caused changes in another. A great example is the rise of flowering plants during the Cretaceous period. The eating habits of plant-eating dinosaurs likely helped these plants spread and become more diverse, adding to the richness of plant life. Even today, we can see hints of these ancient relationships in modern ecosystems. The way large plant eaters and predators interact is similar to how dinosaurs live in their environment. By studying these ancient systems, we can learn more about how ecosystems work and how species affect their surroundings. However, despite their success, dinosaurs couldn't avoid extinction. What could have ended the reign of such strong and varied creatures? Let's explore the catastrophic events that wiped them out and changed life on Earth forever. At the end of the Triassic and Cretaceous periods, the mass extinctions that occurred were not just small events in the big picture of Earth's history. They were key moments that strongly affected the survival and development of dinosaurs. The extinction at the end of the Cretaceous, caused by the Chicxulub impact, was a disaster of unimaginable size. A giant comet or asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula, releasing energy equal to billions of atomic bombs. The impact caused huge forest fires and massive tsunamis and cooled the planet dramatically, leading to a nuclear winter, a quick and extreme drop in the Earth's temperature. This terrible event completely changed the environment, causing the extinction of non-avian dinosaurs and the widespread death of many other animal species. But this wasn't the first time Earth had experienced such a terrible event. About 201 million years ago, at the end of the Triassic period, another mass extinction took place. While this earlier event is not as well understood, it was just as important. Volcanic eruptions, climate changes, and a lack of oxygen in the oceans likely played major roles in the sudden loss of many species. To understand which dinosaurs managed to survive these world-changing events, scientists use advanced statistical models. By studying fossil records, they can find patterns that show which species were more resilient and able to adapt. Research has shown that while some groups of dinosaurs faced high extinction rates, others showed strong strength and adaptability. One key to survival was the ability to adjust to rapid changes in the environment. Dinosaurs that could deal with sudden changes in climate and food sources had a better chance of surviving. For example, small feathered theropods proved to be especially resilient. Their ability to change their diets and adapt to new environments helped them survive the harsh conditions of these mass extinctions. Contrary to what many might think, these adaptable species were among the survivors of these disastrous events. Not all dinosaurs died in the huge events that ended their reign. Some species, like modern birds, developed from theropod dinosaurs and managed to survive. These tough survivors thrived after the event, creating new paths for evolution that would eventually lead to the wide variety of life we see today. After the mass extinctions, flowering plants started to appear, changing ecosystems. These new plants not only offered fresh food sources, but also created new homes, helping the species that remained survive and diversify. By studying these ancient extinction events, we learn more about the strength of life and how changes in the environment influence the course of evolution. This knowledge helps us understand the fragile balance of our ecosystems today and shows the importance of biodiversity, especially as we face modern environmental problems. Even after years of research, the mysteries are chemical changes that can mess up the original genetic code. Still, thanks to advances in genomic technology, scientists have been able to make important discoveries, pushing the limits of what we know about the dinosaurs that once roamed the Earth. In the early 21st century, a revolutionary technology called massively parallel sequencing changed the field of paleogenomics. This innovation allows scientists to sequence many pieces of DNA at the same time, making it possible to collect a much larger amount of genetic information from ancient remains. Another advanced method, called hybrid selection and solution, helps extract the most important DNA fragments from a mix of damaged and broken samples. One of the most exciting possibilities in the field of dinosaur genetics is its ability to uncover the evolutionary connections between ancient creatures and modern animals. By comparing the DNA of non-avian dinosaurs with that of today's birds, researchers can trace how genetic traits have developed over millions of years. For example, certain features unique to birds can be traced back to their dinosaur ancestors, providing fascinating evidence of the deep connections between these two groups. However, studying ancient DNA comes with its own set of challenges. One key difficulty is AIC phasing, which involves identifying the initial genetic differences within an organism. This step is crucial for understanding the genetic variety of ancient species and how they are related to each other. In the past, many studies failed to include this step, leading to possible mistakes in their findings. Thankfully, recent advances are helping to fill in this gap, offering scientists more accurate and trustworthy genetic data than ever before. Through the study of comparative genomics, scientists have found interesting patterns in the DNA of reptiles and birds. For example, some non-bird reptiles, like the tuatara, have genomes that are very different from those of birds and mammals. These differences are mainly in the structure of their genetic material, which includes varying amounts of key components. These unique patterns in genetic structure affect important factors, like how often genes mix and how closely packed they are, giving clues about the evolutionary forces that shaped these creatures. By studying these differences, scientists are getting a better understanding of how species have adapted to their environments over millions of years. Ancient DNA studies are also revealing the biological complexity of dinosaurs and the ongoing processes of evolution that still influence life on Earth today. As we reach the end of our exploration into the world of dinosaurs, we come to a key point in Earth's history, the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary, about 66 million years ago. At this time, a huge asteroid hit Earth, causing a series of disastrous events that greatly changed the planet's climate. The impact caused huge fires, massive tsunamis, and long periods of darkness from dust and ash filling the atmosphere. These disasters wiped out about 75% of all life, including the last of the non-avian dinosaurs. Yet from this mass extinction, life eventually recovered. New ecosystems began to form and develop, laying the foundation for the incredible variety of life we see today. The end of the Triassic period marked a huge mass extinction, with the biggest effects felt in the oceans. Many marine species disappeared, including conodonts, a group of early eel-like creatures, and almost all marine reptiles, leaving only a few, like the ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs, behind. Invertebrates, like brachiopods and mollusks, including snails, were also hit hard, with 22% of marine families and possibly half of marine genera disappearing from the oceans. While this extinction event wasn't as harmful to all land ecosystems, it still had a big effect on many groups. Several important types of crurotarsans, large reptilian creatures once thought to belong to a group called the thecodonts, were wiped out. Most of the large ancient amphibians, as well as smaller reptiles and most of the synapsids, early ancestors of mammals, also vanished. Some of the earliest dinosaurs still in their basic forms went extinct. However, the more adaptable dinosaurs survived and eventually evolved into the thriving species that would dominate the Jurassic period. On land, surviving plant species, such as conifers, modern pine trees, and cycadioids, early relatives of cycads, went on to grow and dominate the Mesozoic world. The exact cause of the Late Triassic extinction remains unclear, but it happened around 202 to 191 million years ago, when massive volcanic eruptions occurred as the supercontinent Pangaea began to break apart. This event formed the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, CAMP, one of the largest volcanic eruptions ever since Earth first cooled. These eruptions were likely a major factor in the extinction, but there are also other possibilities, though they are considered less likely. Some scientists suggest global cooling or even a meteorite impact could have played a role. One such impact site is the Manicouagan Reservoir in Quebec, Canada, which has been linked to a large impact. However, recent dating of the impact melt suggests it happened about 214 million years ago, which is earlier than the Triassic-Jurassic boundary. The exact timing of the Triassic-Jurassic boundary has now been pinned down more precisely to about 201.4 million years ago, thanks to more accurate methods of radiometric dating. These techniques, such as measuring the decay of uranium to lead in ancient zircons formed during the impact, have shown that the Manicouagan impact occurred about 10 million years before the extinction event, making it unlikely to have caused the extinction directly. The exact number of extinctions during the Late Triassic is still debated among scientists. Some studies suggest that there were at least 2 major extinction events near the end of the Triassic, with a gap of about 12 to 17 million years between them. However, a recent study of ancient life forms in North America challenges this idea. In the petrified forest of northeastern Arizona, there is a rare collection of rocks from the late Carnian to early Nourian periods. A study in 2002 found no major changes in the environment during this time. The most common fossils found here are phytosaurs, and they only experienced a shift at the genus level, meaning the overall number of species remained unchanged. Additionally, some other reptiles, like Etosaurs and early dinosaurs, continued to thrive without significant change. Despite this, both phytosaurs and etosaurs were among the groups of reptiles that completely disappeared by the end of the Triassic, during the mass extinction event. This suggests that there may have been a smaller extinction event at the end of the Carnian period, where several groups of herbivorous reptiles went extinct. At the same time, large plant-eating therapsids, such as the Cannemieria, Dicynodonts, and Traversodont cynodonts, became much less common in the northern part of the supercontinent Pangaea, Laurasia. These extinctions during the Triassic, especially towards the end, cleared the way for dinosaurs to spread into new environments that had been left empty. As a result, dinosaurs became more abundant, diverse, and dominant. This dominance lasted for around 150 million years, but the real age of dinosaurs is considered to have occurred during the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods rather than the Triassic. The end of the Permian period brought about the largest extinction event in Earth's history, known as the Permian-Triassic extinction. This catastrophic event wiped out an astonishing 90% to 95% of marine life and about 70% of all species living on land. It was so severe that it even led to the extinction of insects, a unique occurrence in mass extinction events. The recovery from this disaster was incredibly slow, with ecosystems on land taking a staggering 30 million years to bounce back. Many ancient creatures, like trilobites, which had flourished for hundreds of millions of years since the Cambrian period, finally vanished forever by the end of the Permian. Interestingly, some species, like nautiloids, a type of cephalopod, managed to survive this global catastrophe, defying expectations. For thousands of years, huge amounts of magma, in the form of massive volcanic flows known as flood basalts, erupted onto the Earth's surface in what is now called the Siberian Traps. This ongoing volcanic activity contributed to a serious environmental crisis, playing a significant role in a mass extinction event. The loss of coastal habitats, combined with an intense rise in dryness and aridity, likely made the situation even worse. Based on the amount of lava produced during this time, scientists estimate that the worst-case scenario could have been the release of enough carbon dioxide into the atmosphere to raise global temperatures by as much as 5 degrees Celsius. Another possible cause for the extinction event involves the release of toxic hydrogen sulfide gas from the deep oceans. During certain periods, parts of the ocean would lose all of their dissolved oxygen, creating conditions that allowed oxygen-free bacteria to thrive. These bacteria would then produce large amounts of hydrogen sulfide. If enough of this gas accumulated in areas of the ocean that lacked oxygen, it could eventually rise into the atmosphere. While some atmospheric gases would destroy the hydrogen sulfide, the gas could quickly use up all available oxygen, causing levels of hydrogen sulfide to soar over a period of a few centuries. Models suggest that such an increase in hydrogen sulfide could have severely damaged the ozone layer in the upper atmosphere. This would have allowed dangerous levels of ultraviolet radiation to reach the Earth's surface, killing off any species that had managed to survive the toxic gases. However, some species do have the ability to metabolize hydrogen sulfide, potentially allowing them to endure in such an extreme environment. One idea builds on the theory of flood basalt eruptions, which are massive volcanic events that release huge amounts of lava. It suggests that a rise in temperature by just 5 degrees Celsius wouldn't be enough to cause the death of 95% of all life on Earth. However, this slight warming could gradually heat the oceans, causing the frozen methane deposits stored deep under the sea near coastlines to melt. When this happens, vast amounts of methane, a powerful greenhouse gas, could be released into the atmosphere. This sudden surge of methane could push global temperatures up by another 5 degrees Celsius, leading to a drastic change in the climate. This theory also helps explain why there was a sudden spike in carbon-12 levels, which scientists have detected in the rock layers from the boundary between the Permian and Triassic periods. The rise in carbon-12 levels coincides with the first phase of the mass extinction, which mostly affected land creatures. The second phase of the extinction targeted marine life and began right after the carbon-12 spike. The final phase of the extinction then returned to land-based species. This chain of events suggests that the release of methane played a key role in triggering these different stages of extinction. About 66 million years ago, a huge disaster wiped out about 3/4 of all plant and animal species on Earth. This moment in history, called the Cretaceous Paleogene (KPG) extinction event, marked the end of the Dinosaurs era. All dinosaurs that didn't evolve into birds died out, along with most land animals weighing more than 25 kilograms, 55 pounds. Only a few tough species like crocodiles and sea turtles managed to survive. This extinction ended the Cretaceous period and the Mesozoic Era, starting a new one, the Cenozoic Era, which continues today. Scientists can see evidence of this disaster in the Earth's layers. Around the world, a thin layer of dirt called the KPG boundary shows this event clearly. This layer has a lot of iridium, a rare metal on Earth but common in asteroids. This clue led scientists to a famous theory. The extinction was caused by a huge asteroid hitting the Earth. In 1980, scientists Luis and Walter Alvarez introduced what became known as the Alvarez hypothesis. They suggested that a giant asteroid about 10 to 15 kilometers, 6 to 9 miles wide, crashed into Earth. The impact released an enormous amount of energy, causing a global environmental crisis. One of the worst effects was an impact winter, where dust and debris blocked sunlight, stopping plants from growing and breaking the food chain. More proof of this theory came in the early 1990s with the discovery of the Chicxulub crater on the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. This 180-kilometer wide, 112 miles crater showed that a huge asteroid had hit the Earth with incredible force. Studies found that the impact vaporized large amounts of gypsum, a type of rock rich in sulfur, releasing tiny particles into the air. These particles stayed in the atmosphere, changing the climate and making the oceans acidic. These changes greatly harmed ecosystems for years. In 2016, scientists drilled into the Chicxulub crater and found more interesting details. The impact had thrown granite from deep inside the Earth to the surface in just minutes, creating the crater's unusual shape. By 2019, more research confirmed that this disaster not only destroyed life on land, but also changed the chemistry of the oceans, causing long-term climate effects. The extinction event at the end of the Cretaceous period was likely caused by a combination of factors, with the most significant being the asteroid impact. While some scientists had once thought volcanic eruptions, like those in the Deccan Traps, along with climate change and rising sea levels, played a major role, Research from January 2020 suggested that the asteroid impact had a bigger impact on mass extinction than volcanic activity. During this catastrophic event, a huge number of species across the planet were wiped out. Most famously, the non-avian dinosaurs, but also many mammals, birds, lizards, insects, plants, and all pterosaurs disappeared. In the oceans, the extinction devastated marine life, including creatures like plesiosaurs and mosasaurs, and severely affected fish, sharks, mollusks, especially ammonites, which went extinct, and plankton species. It's estimated that 75% or more of Earth species vanished. However, this mass extinction also opened up new opportunities for life. With so many ecological niches emptied, surviving species had a chance to evolve in new ways, leading to what's called adaptive radiation, when new species rapidly emerged to fill available roles. Mammals, for example, quickly diversified in the Paleogene period, evolving into new forms like horses, whales, bats, and primates. The few surviving dinosaurs, birds, also evolved into all the species we know today. Even some fish and possibly lizards evolved into new forms during this time. The KPG extinction was a dramatic global event which occurred very quickly and affected species in all corners of the Earth. Fossil evidence shows that non-avian dinosaurs were spread across continents like North America, Europe, Asia, Africa, South America, and Antarctica during the late Cretaceous, but they disappeared everywhere once the event hit. Similarly, fossilized pollen reveals that plant life across diverse regions such as New Mexico, Alaska, China, and New Zealand was devastated. Interestingly, areas closer to the poles seem to have been less impacted than those near the equator. The extinction event had a huge impact on life, but not all species were affected in the same way. There was a lot of variation in how different groups of animals and plants responded. Plants that relied on sunlight to grow, like those that photosynthesize, suffered the most. When particles filled the atmosphere, blocking sunlight, these plants either dwindled or disappeared entirely. This caused a major shift in the types of plants that dominated the Earth. Animals that ate a variety of foods, like omnivores, insect eaters, and scavengers, managed to survive. This may have been because their food sources, such as insects and carrion, were still abundant. On the other hand, mammals that only ate plants or only ate meat didn't seem to survive. The animals that made it through this disaster mainly fed on insects, worms, and snails, all of which thrived on decaying plants and animals. In ecosystems like streams and lakes, few animals went extinct, even large ones like crocodiles and related species. These animals didn't rely as much on living plants for food, instead depending on dead plant and animal matter, or detritus, which kept them from dying out. Modern crocodiles can go months without food, and even their young rely on invertebrates and decaying matter in their early years. These survival traits helped crocodiles last through the crisis at the end of the Cretaceous period. The oceans saw a different pattern. Animals living in the water column, like those depending on plankton, were hit much harder than creatures living on or on the ocean floor. Ocean floor animals often feed on detritus, so they are less affected. Species like ammonites, which were eaten by giant marine reptiles called mosasaurs, vanished. These shifts highlight how important food sources were in determining survival. The KPG extinction was a game-changer for life on Earth. The loss of many dominant species opened up opportunities for other organisms to thrive, leading to a burst of new species during the Paleogene period. However, despite plenty of open ecological niches, it took a long time for biodiversity to recover. Evidence suggests that recovery happened faster in the southern hemisphere compared to the northern hemisphere. Although we know that a huge number of species were wiped out, there are only a few places where we can find clear evidence of the mass die-off at the KPG boundary. One of these is the Tanis site in the Hell Creek Formation in North Dakota, USA. Here, many fossils have been found, some remarkably well preserved, and they appear to have been buried quickly in a flood, possibly triggered by the impact event. Another important site is the Hornerstown Formation in New Jersey, USA, which contains a special layer at the KPG boundary known as the main fossiliferous layer. This layer holds disarticulated vertebrate fossils, likely the result of another catastrophic flood caused by the impact. The Paleozoic Era is the first of the three main geological periods in the Phanerozoic Eon. It began about 538.8 million years ago after the Neoproterozoic Era and lasted until around 251.9 million years ago when the Mesozoic Era started. The Paleozoic is split into 6 periods: Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, Carboniferous, and Permian. Some classifications divide it into 2 parts: the early Paleozoic, which includes the Cambrian, Ordovician, and Silurian periods, and the late Paleozoic, which includes the Devonian, Carboniferous, and Permian periods. The word Paleozoic was first used by Adam Sedgwick in 1838 to describe the Cambrian and Ordovician periods. Later, in 1840, John Phillips expanded the term to include the Cambrian through the Permian periods. It comes from the Greek words paleos, old, and zoe, life, meaning ancient life. The Paleozoic was a time of huge changes in Earth's geology, climate, and living creatures. It started with a burst of life known as the Cambrian explosion, when most of the major animal groups that still exist today first appeared. In the early Paleozoic, life began in the ocean, but by the end of the era, plants and animals had spread across the land. The first forests, made up of early plants, covered much of the continents and later became the coal deposits we use today. Throughout the Paleozoic, life evolved quickly. Arthropods, mollusks, fish, amphibians, reptiles, and early mammals, called synapsids, all appeared. By the end of the era, giant synapsids and diapsids, early reptiles, ruled the Earth, and the first modern plants like conifers had appeared. The era ended with the biggest mass extinction event in the history of the Phanerozoic Eon, the Permian-Triassic extinction event. This disaster was so bad that it took life on land 30 million years to fully recover. Recovery in the oceans was much faster. The end of the Paleozoic era also marked major changes in Earth's continents. At the start, the supercontinent Pannotia was breaking apart, and by the end, the supercontinent Pangaea was forming. Pannotia started to split during the Cambrian period, creating new seas and rising sea levels. Evidence shows that during the early Paleozoic, Central Africa was near the South Pole. Later, the huge landmass of Gondwana, which included parts of what are now Africa, South America, Antarctica, and Australia, formed. By the middle of the Paleozoic, North America and Europe collided, forming mountain ranges. By the end of the Paleozoic, the collision of continents had formed the supercontinent Pangaea, creating mountain ranges like the Appalachians, Urals, and Caledonides. The Cambrian period was a time of great change, often called the Cambrian explosion. During this period, life flourished at an incredible rate, with the first armored arthropods, like trilobites, becoming common. This period saw the evolution of almost all the major groups of marine life we recognize today. The supercontinent Pannotia was starting to break up, and much of it would eventually become part of the supercontinent Gondwana. The Ordovician period saw the development of many animal groups that still exist today, including early fish and cephalopods. The first arthropods began to move onto land. However, by the end of this period, the Earth went through a major ice age, which caused sea levels to drop and led to a mass extinction. This event, called the Ordovician-Silurian extinction, wiped out many marine species and was the second deadliest extinction event in Earth's history. The Silurian period marked a recovery from the earlier ice age. Fish diversified, with the first jawed fish and freshwater species appearing. This period also saw the first steps of life on land, with arachnids, fungi, and centipedes evolving. The first vascular plants, which allowed plants to grow taller, began to spread across the land. The Devonian period is known as the Age of the Fish due to the explosion of fish diversity during this time. The first land-dwelling vertebrates, the amphibians, evolved, while plant life exploded with the evolution of trees and seeds. This period also saw the appearance of the first tetrapods, four-limbed creatures that would eventually evolve into land animals. However, the period ended with the Late Devonian extinction, which wiped out around 70% of marine species. The Carboniferous period is named for the vast coal deposits that were laid down during this time. The period was marked by high temperatures and the spread of large forests. The first reptiles evolved, and the first amniotic eggs allowed some amphibians to move further inland. The Carboniferous ended with a cooling trend that led to ice formation, especially in Gondwana. The Permian period was the final period of the Paleozoic. By this time, all of Earth's continents had come together to form the supercontinent Pangaea. The land was dry with harsh climates that made it difficult for many organisms to survive. Towards the end of the period, huge volcanic eruptions, combined with other catastrophic events, caused the largest mass extinction in Earth's history, known as the Great Dying. Around 95% of all species on Earth went extinct during this event, and it took millions of years for life to fully recover. The Permian period is a fascinating chapter in Earth's history, lasting about 47 million years. It began around 298.9 million years ago, right after the Carboniferous period, and ended about 251.9 million years ago, just before the start of the Triassic period. The Permian is the sixth and final period of the Paleozoic Era, and after it, the Triassic marked the beginning of the Mesozoic Era. The term Permian was first introduced in 1841 by the British geologist Sir Roderick Murchison, who named it after the Perm region in Russia, where he discovered its geological significance. During this period, the world was dominated by a massive landmass known as the supercontinent Pangaea, formed when the continents Euramerica and Gondwana collided. Surrounding this vast land was the enormous ocean called Panthalassa. One of the most significant events of the Permian was the collapse of the Carboniferous rainforests, which led to the spread of vast deserts across the interior of the continent. This drastic environmental change made life more challenging for many creatures, but it also created opportunities for animals that could survive in dry conditions. Amniotes, a group of animals that included early mammals and reptiles, thrived because they were better adapted to life in these harsher, drier environments, replacing their amphibian ancestors as the dominant creatures on land. Throughout the Permian, the planet experienced several mass extinction events. At least 3 major extinction events are recognized, with some experts suggesting there may have been as many as 4. The first of these occurred at the end of the early Permian, Ciceralian, when many ancient primitive synapsids, known as palicosaurs, disappeared, giving way to more advanced species called therapsids. Later in the Permian, another major extinction event occurred at the end of the Capetanian stage, often linked to the eruption of the emission traps in what is now China. However, the most catastrophic event of all came at the very end of the Permian, during the Permian-Triassic extinction event, also known as the Great Dying. This event marked the largest mass extinction in Earth's history, wiping out nearly 81% of marine species and 70% of land-based species. It is believed to have been triggered by the eruption of the massive Siberian traps in present-day Russia. The effects of this disaster were so severe that life on Earth took a long time to recover. On land, ecosystems didn't fully bounce back for another 30 million years, well into the Triassic period. The Permian period is divided into 3 distinct parts, or epochs, listed from the oldest to the youngest: the Ciceralian, Guadalupian, and Lopingian. To understand the period more clearly, geologists further break down the rock layers from this time into smaller sections known as stages. Each stage represents a specific slice of time, referred to as an age. These stages can either describe global patterns or focus on regional variations. To ensure consistency in how these stages are defined worldwide, the International Commission on Stratigraphy, ICS, has established a standard process. This involves selecting a specific rock formation, called a stratotype, to mark the beginning of each stage. This precise point, known as the Global Boundary Stratotype Section and Point, GSSP, helps scientists link rock layers from around the world. For much of the 20th century, the Permian period was simply divided into the early and late Permian, with the Kongurian stage marking the final phase of the early Permian. However, in 1992, geologist Glenister and his colleagues suggested a more detailed division. They argued that the Rowettian-Capetanian interval was unique enough to stand alone as its epoch. This three-part system was officially accepted in 1999. When studying the fossils of the Permian, researchers initially focused on ammonoids, marine creatures with coiled shells. However, ammonoids are not commonly found in Permian rocks, and their species often lived for long periods, making them less useful for pinpointing specific stages. Instead, scientists now rely on the fossils of conodonts, tiny jawless animals with tooth-like structures. These creatures serve as reliable time markers for most of the Paleozoic and even into the Triassic. The geography of the Permian was dominated by the colossal supercontinent Pangaea, which brought together nearly all the world's land masses. Pangaea stretched from the equator to the poles, significantly influencing the flow of ocean currents in the vast global ocean known as Panthalassa, as well as the smaller Paleotethys Ocean. As the period progressed, the Cimmeria continent began to drift away from Gondwana, shrinking the Paleotethys Ocean and giving rise to the Neotethys Ocean, which would play a major role in the Mesozoic Era. During this time, tectonic activity was intense. The central Pangaean Mountains, formed by the collision of Laurasia and Gondwana during the previous Carboniferous period, reached their peak height, comparable to today's Himalayas, around 295 million years ago. These mountains gradually eroded as time went on. Elsewhere, the Kazakhstania block collided with Baltica, while the North China Craton, South China block, and Indochina joined together with Pangaea by the end of the Permian. In what is now northwestern Europe, a unique body of water called the Zechstein Sea, rich in salt, covered the region, leaving behind thick deposits that tell the story of this ancient world. The interiors of large land masses during ancient times experienced dramatic swings in weather. Summers were scorching hot, and winters were bitterly cold. This is what scientists call a continental climate. These areas also faced strong monsoon seasons, where rainfall was concentrated in certain months. Interestingly, deserts were widespread across the supercontinent Pangaea during this era. These dry conditions gave an advantage to gymnosperms, plants like conifers and ginkgos that produce seeds protected by a tough outer covering. Unlike ferns, which rely on moist environments to spread their spores, gymnosperms thrived in the arid climate. It was during this time, known as the Permian period, that the first modern trees, such as conifers, ginkgos, and cycads, made their debut. Three regions in particular are famous for their rich deposits of Permian-era rocks. These include the Ural Mountains in Russia, where the name Permian originates, parts of China, and the southwestern United States, especially Texas. The Permian Basin, located in Texas and New Mexico, contains some of the world's thickest layers of rocks from this period, earning it its name. During the early Permian, sea levels underwent fascinating changes. At first, they dropped slightly, but then stabilized at a height several tens of meters above today's levels. However, starting in the middle of the period, there was a significant decline. By the later part of the Permian, sea levels had dropped to their lowest point in the entire Paleozoic Era, reaching almost the same level as today. A small rise occurred toward the end of the period, but it was minor compared to the earlier drop. These shifts in sea levels are key markers that help scientists piece together the ancient history of Earth. The Triassic period was an interesting time in Earth's history, lasting about 50.5 million years. It started just after the Permian period, 251.9 million years ago, and ended around 201.4 million years ago, leading into the Jurassic period. This was the first and shortest period of the Mesozoic Era, and the seventh period of the Phanerozoic Eon. Both the beginning and end of the Triassic were marked by major extinction events that greatly affected life on Earth. The Triassic is divided into three main stages: early, middle, and late Triassic. The Triassic followed the massive Permian-Triassic extinction event, which left Earth's ecosystems badly damaged. It took a long time for life to recover, and it wasn't until the middle of the Triassic that ecosystems started to become diverse again. The life forms that appeared during this time can be grouped into three types: survivors of the extinction, new species that lasted only a short time, and new species that thrived and went on to shape life in the Mesozoic Era. Reptiles, especially archosaurs, were the main land animals during the Triassic. Dinosaurs, a type of archosaur, first appeared in the late Triassic but didn't become the top predators until the Jurassic. During this period, many types of archosaurs thrived, including pseudosuchians, which were relatives of modern crocodiles, and pterosaurs, which were the first vertebrates to fly. Theropsids, the group of vertebrates that had been dominant in the Permian period, briefly diversified in the Triassic, but most of them went extinct by the end of the period. However, it was also during the Triassic that the first mammals evolved from cynodonts appeared. These early mammals would survive the mass extinction and thrive during the Jurassic. Amphibians, especially large aquatic predators known as temnospondyls, also had a short revival before becoming extinct. However, early ancestors of modern amphibians, like frogs and salamanders, began to appear and survived the extinction. Fish species, like the earliest types of teleosts and holocstines, also appeared during this time, quickly spreading across both fresh and saltwater environments. The supercontinent Pangaea covered Earth's surface during the Triassic. Pangaea was a huge landmass that stretched across the globe, mostly centered on the equator and extending towards the poles. Over time, Pangaea slowly began to break apart, with the northern landmass called Laurasia and the southern landmass, Gondwana, gradually forming during the late Triassic and early Jurassic. The climate during the Triassic was mostly hot and dry, with large deserts covering much of Pangaea's interior. However, as the landmasses started to drift apart, the climate became more humid. The end of the Triassic period was marked by another mass extinction event, the Triassic-Jurassic extinction, which wiped out many species and allowed dinosaurs to become the dominant life forms in the Jurassic. During the Triassic, Pangaea's landmasses were surrounded by a vast ocean called Panthalassa, which roughly corresponds to today's Pacific Ocean. Very little is known about this ocean because the oceanic crust has since been recycled. What we do know comes from island arcs and rare sediments found in places like Japan and western North America. To the east of Pangaea were two large oceans, the Neotethys and the Paleotethys. These oceans were full of marine life and covered a wide area from China to Iberia. The Paleotethys shrank as it was subducted under Asia, while the Neotethys grew larger. Eventually, this led to the collision of the Cimmerian terrains with southern Asia, forming mountains that would stretch from Turkey to Malaysia. Pangaea itself was full of fault lines and rift basins during the Triassic, especially towards the end of the period. These rift basins eventually formed the earliest signs of Pangaea's breakup. In areas like the United States, South America, and Europe, evidence of these rifts can be found in large deposits of sediments, such as the Newark supergroup in North America. Terrestrial environments, especially in South Africa, Russia, and the southwest United States, also offer rich clues about life during the Triassic, including fossils of early vertebrates and crustaceans, like clam shrimps. Marine deposits from the Triassic are fairly rare, but Western Europe has yielded some of the most important evidence. In regions like northern India and Arabia, Stable passive margins along the Neotethys Ocean preserved important marine sediments. In North America, marine deposits are mostly found in the western regions. The climate of the Triassic was mostly dry and hot in the continental interior, leading to the formation of redbed sandstones and evaporate deposits. There is no evidence of glaciation at either pole, and even the polar regions had temperate climates, allowing for forests to grow. The immense size of Pangaea meant that the continent's climate was highly seasonal, with extremely hot summers and cold winters. This vast landmass caused intense cross-equatorial monsoons, often referred to as the Pangaean mega-monsoons, which were a unique feature of this period. The Triassic period was mostly dry, but there were times when rainfall increased a lot in tropical and subtropical areas, especially around the Tethys Sea and nearby lands. Evidence, such as certain fossils and sediments, shows these wetter times, especially from the Anisian to Ladinian stages in the Tethys region, and from the Carnian to Rhaetian stages in wider areas like Svalbard, North America, South China, and Argentina. The most studied of these wetter periods was the Carnian pluvial event, which was probably the most widespread and intense. The early Triassic was the hottest time of the entire Phanerozoic era after huge volcanic eruptions in the Siberian traps that released large amounts of greenhouse gases. This period began with the Permian-Triassic thermal maximum, followed by a short cooling phase called the Diurnarian cooling, and then another warm period called the latest Smithian thermal maximum. Temperatures briefly dropped during the latest Olenekian cooling by about 6 degrees Celsius. As we moved into the Middle Triassic, temperatures were generally cooler than in the early Triassic, with a cooling trend throughout the Anisian, except for a warming spike toward the end of the stage. The cooling continued until the Ladinian-Carnian cooling period, which lasted from 242 to 233 million years ago. At the start of the Carnian, global temperatures stayed relatively cool. However, around 234 million years ago, the eruption of the Rangelia Large igneous province caused a sudden rise in temperatures, ending the cooling period. This warming started the Carnian pluvial event, bringing about a phase of increased global humidity. The mid-Carnian warm interval followed, lasting from 234 to 227 million years ago. A big change in carbon cycles occurred at the Carnian-Norian boundary, showing an increase in the burial of organic carbon. Afterward, there was a cooling period called the early Norian cool interval, lasting from 227 to 217 million years ago, followed by the mid-Norian warm interval. This warm period was briefly interrupted by a cooling phase possibly caused by a meteorite impact around 220 million years ago. Around 212 million years ago, changes in Earth's orbit led to a period of wetter conditions, reducing dry areas. The Rhaetian cool interval lasted from 209 to 201 million years ago, and by the end of the Triassic, an extreme warming event known as the End-Triassic Thermal Event, ETTE, triggered the Triassic-Jurassic mass extinction. After the Permian-Triassic extinction, which wiped out most land life, biodiversity began to recover as surviving species filled the empty ecological spaces. However, it took 30 million years for diverse ecosystems with complex food webs to reappear. Archosauromorph reptiles, which had started to appear in the Permian, grew rapidly in variety during the Triassic, adapting quickly to fill the gaps left by the extinction. Early Triassic archosauromorphs included pterosaurs, which were long-necked and lizard-like. Some, like the Tanystropheus, had necks longer than their bodies, while others, like the Charovipterygidae, used their long hind limbs to glide. These reptiles were mostly plant-eaters, with special jaws for eating plants. Other archosauromorphs, like rhynchosaurs and allocotosaurs, were mostly plant-eaters, with thick bodies and special teeth. Rhynchosaurs, with their barrel-shaped bodies, were common during the Middle Triassic, but became extinct by 220 million years ago. Allocotosaurs, resembling iguanas, included species like Trilophosaurus, which had unique three-crowned teeth. and Pteroturpeton, which had a long, beak-like snout. Among the archosauromorphs, archosauriforms stood out for their predatory nature. These creatures, which had serrated teeth and upright limbs, included the robust and large-headed erythrosuchids, the dominant carnivores of the early Triassic. Phytosaurs, crocodile-like predators that lived in the Late Triassic, were common. They hunted small reptiles and fish near the water's edge, although they were not true crocodiles, showing an example of convergent evolution. True archosaurs appeared in the early Triassic and split into two main groups: Avametatarsalia, which eventually led to birds, and Pseudosuchia, which gave rise to crocodilians. Although Avametatarsalia were not widespread initially, they gave rise to the first pterosaurs and dinosaurs by the Late Triassic. The first pterosaurs appeared around 217 million years ago, with their long tails and wings. Early dinosaurs, such as the small sauropodomorphs and theropods, also evolved during the Carnian. While dinosaurs were still small, species like Coelophysis, measuring just 1 to 2 meters long, became more common. Pseudosuchians, including Etosaurs and Rauisuchians, were much more dominant. Etosaurs were armored reptiles that were common during the Late Triassic and mostly ate plants, though some may have eaten meat. Rauisuchians, the main predators of the time, came in various forms. Some were giant hunters, while others were smaller, bipedal omnivores. These creatures likely filled the predator role that theropod dinosaurs would take over later. Rauisuchians also gave rise to early crocodilomorphs, which survived into the Jurassic. The Triassic seas were home to many marine reptiles, including Sauropterygia, which featured creatures like Pachypleurosaurus and Nothosaurus. There were also Placodonts, the earliest plant-eating marine reptiles, and Ichthyopterygians, which thrived in early Triassic seas. By the Middle Triassic, some Ichthyopterygians grew to impressive sizes. The earliest turtles appeared during the Late Triassic, along with other reptiles like the Sphenodontia, which are related to modern-day tuataras. Procolophonids, small lizard-like plant-eaters, were also common. Another unique group, the dromaeosaurs, were chameleon-like reptiles with special claws and bird-like heads that lived in trees. The Jurassic period was a time in Earth's history that lasted from about 1.4 million years ago to around 145 million years ago, marking the middle phase of the Mesozoic Era. It's the 8th period of the Phanerozoic Eon, and its name comes from the Jura Mountains, where early fossils from this time were first discovered. The beginning of the Jurassic was dramatic, marked by a major extinction event known as the Triassic-Jurassic extinction. This event is believed to have been caused by a massive volcanic eruption in what is now the Central Atlantic region. Around 183 million years ago, the Toarcian Age started, signaling a time of global environmental changes. This included a period of oceanic anoxia, lack of oxygen, acidification of the oceans, and rising global temperatures, all of which led to further extinctions. These changes were likely caused by another round of volcanic eruptions, specifically from large igneous provinces like Karoo-Farar. Unlike other geological periods, the end of the Jurassic doesn't have a clear-cut boundary. The shift from the Jurassic to the Cretaceous remains undefined to this day. Geologically, the start of the Jurassic saw the breakup of the supercontinent Pangaea into two smaller landmasses, Laurasia in the north and Gondwana in the south. During this period, the climate was much warmer than today, with no ice caps and lush forests growing near the poles. Large deserts stretched across the equator. On land, the transition from the earlier Triassic period saw the rise of dinosaurs, which took over as the dominant group of animals. Early birds, which evolved from theropod dinosaurs, made their first appearance. Other creatures like crabs, modern frogs, salamanders, and lizards also emerged during the Jurassic. Mammals, though still small and unremarkable, continued to evolve, and by the end of the period, the first modern mammals had appeared. Crocodiles also adapted to an aquatic lifestyle. Meanwhile, the seas teemed with marine reptiles like ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs, and flying reptiles known as pterosaurs ruled the skies. Sharks and rays first appeared, and the first teleost fish, a major group of modern fish, appeared as well. The land was dominated by ferns and gymnosperms such as conifers, many of which still exist today. The Jurassic period is divided into 3 epochs: early, middle, and late, and the rocks from this time are broken down into series known as Lower, Middle, and Upper Jurassic. Geologists use these divisions to study the period more accurately, relying heavily on ammonites, ancient mollusks, as markers for different time intervals. These ammonites serve as index fossils, helping geologists track the beginning and end of specific stages. The global stratigraphy for the Jurassic is based on ammonite zones, which help correlate different parts of the world to the same periods. The earliest stage of the Jurassic is the Hatangian, named after a small town in France. The first appearance of certain ammonites marked the start of this stage. Similarly, other stages like the Sinemurian, Plains-Bacchian, and Toarcian are defined by the first appearance of specific ammonite species in certain regions, such as Somerset, England, and Portugal. The following stages, including the Alenian, Bajocian, and Bathonian, are named after towns in Europe, and the precise boundaries of each stage are marked by the appearance of new ammonite species. However, some boundaries remain under discussion as new evidence comes to light. Despite the differences in the location of these boundary markers, the study of ammonites continues to be crucial in understanding the Jurassic period and its changing environments. The small village of Kimmeridge, located on the coast of Dorset in England, is where the name Kimmeridgian comes from. In 1842, a scientist named Alcide d'Orbigny named this geological period after the famous Kimmeridge clay found there. The official point marking the start of the Kimmeridgian, called the Global Boundary Stratotype Section and Point, GSSP, was set at the Flotagary section in Staffen Bay on the Isle of Skye, Scotland in 2021. This boundary is identified by the first appearance of specific ammonites, which signify 2 different zones of marine life, the boreal Bauhini zone and the subboreal Bailey zone. The Tithonian period, first introduced in 1865 by Albert Oppel, has a unique name derived from Greek mythology, unlike most geological stages that are named after places. Tithonus, a character from Greek myths, was a prince from Troy who was loved by Eos, the goddess of dawn. Oppel chose this name to reflect the Tithonians' connection to the dawn of the Cretaceous period. Currently, there is no official GSSP for the beginning of the Tithonian, but scientists generally define it by the first appearance of the ammonite genus Gravicia. The boundary between the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, however, remains one of the most challenging to define. Despite much effort, scientists have not yet settled on a GSSP for this boundary, mainly because many of the biological markers used to identify it vary by region. There are no clear chemical markers like sudden changes in isotopes to help pinpoint the transition either. Some researchers believe that a group of planktonic organisms called calpionellids, particularly Calpionella alpina, could help define the start of the Cretaceous. Other suggestions include using the appearance of the ammonite Strambergella jacobi, but this has been debated because its appearance doesn't align with the appearance of C. alpina. During the Jurassic, the climate was generally warmer than today by about 5 to 10 degrees Celsius, 9 to 18 degrees Fahrenheit, with atmospheric carbon dioxide levels believed to be about 4 times higher than current levels. While the Earth's climate was mostly warm, there were occasional cold snaps that interrupted the greenhouse-like conditions. Even near the poles, forests grew, experiencing warm summers and cold, sometimes snowy winters. However, ice sheets were unlikely due to the high summer temperatures that prevented the accumulation of snow, though mountain glaciers may have existed. In some areas, such as northeastern Siberia, evidence like dropstones and glendonites suggests cold winters during the early and middle Jurassic. The oceans were also warmer, with water depths likely 8 degrees Celsius, 14 degrees Fahrenheit, hotter than today. Coral reefs thrived much further from the equator, reaching up to 10 degrees of latitude farther north and south. The intertropical convergence zone, which drives tropical weather, was probably present over the oceans, causing large desert and scrubland areas near the equator between 40 degrees N and S. Rainforests and tundra were probably rare or non-existent. One of the major changes during the Jurassic was the decline of the Pangaean megamonsoon, a large-scale weather system that had shaped the climate during the Permian and Triassic periods. The frequency of wildfires was tied to the 405,000-year eccentricity cycle, which describes Earth's changing orbit. Meanwhile, the breakup of Pangaea caused significant changes in the hydrological cycle. The start of the Jurassic was marked by a sudden warming event, possibly linked to the mass extinction at the end of the Triassic and the eruption of massive volcanic provinces in the central Atlantic. The early Jurassic experienced a cool interval from 199 to 183 million years ago, but temperatures spiked again during the Torsion between 183 and 174 million years ago, possibly due to the Torsion oceanic anoxic event. This period saw ocean surface temperatures rise above 30 degrees, 86 degrees Celsius, and the land regions of Pangaea became extremely hot, reaching over 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Following this warm spell, the Middle Jurassic cool interval occurred between 174 and 164 million years ago, which may have included brief periods of icehouse conditions. The climate of Europe shifted from being quite dry to more humid at the Alenian-Bajocian boundary, then became arid again in the Middle Bajocian. A potential ice age occurred during the Late Bajocian, followed by a warm period during the Kimmeridgian from 164 to 150 million years ago, one of the wettest times in the Jurassic. The interior of Pangaea experienced milder seasonal changes thanks to the expansion of oceans, which provided more moisture. Temperatures fell again in the Tithonian, marking the early Tithonian cooling event. The end of the Jurassic period was marked by another cool interval, known as the Tithonian Early Barremian Cool Interval, starting 150 million years ago and continuing into the early Cretaceous. This period was defined by significant shifts in climate, which shaped the Earth's ecosystems and eventually led to the rise of the Cretaceous period. The Cretaceous period is a chapter in Earth's history that lasted from about 145 to 66 million years ago. It is the third and final period of the Mesozoic Era, which is often called the Age of Dinosaurs. It also happens to be the longest period of this era and is the ninth longest in all of the geological time scale, lasting roughly 79 million years. The name Cretaceous comes from the Latin word creta, meaning chalk, because of the abundance of chalk deposits that formed toward the end of this period. The period is often abbreviated as K because of its German translation, Kreide. During the Cretaceous, the climate was warmer than today, leading to higher sea levels that created shallow seas and oceans. These waters were teeming with now extinct marine creatures like large reptiles, ammonites, shelled creatures, and rudists, clam-like organisms. On land, dinosaurs were still the dominant species, continuing their reign across the planet. Most of the world was free from ice, although there were some cold spells in the early part of the period. Remarkably, forests stretched to the poles, which is a stark contrast to today's icy landscapes. The Cretaceous is significant because many groups of life that we recognize today had their origins during this time. It was during this period that the first mammals and birds appeared, including the earliest forms of placental and marsupial mammals. Fish, too, evolved during this time, with a group called acanthomorphs emerging in the oceans. These fish are the ancestors of many modern fish species. One of the most important developments was the arrival of flowering plants. These plants rapidly diversified and eventually became the dominant group by the end of the Cretaceous, pushing aside older plant types, such as the gymnosperms. However, the Cretaceous ended dramatically. It closed with the famous Cretaceous Paleogene extinction event, a massive disaster that wiped out numerous species, including all non-avian dinosaurs, large marine reptiles, and flying reptiles known as pterosaurs. The widely accepted cause of this mass extinction is the impact of a giant asteroid, which struck Earth and created the Chicxulub crater in what is now Mexico. This event marked a sharp boundary in the fossil record, known as the KP boundary, which separates the Mesozoic from the Cenozoic era. The term Cretaceous as a distinct period was first introduced by Belgian geologist Jean de Mallius de Halloy in 1822, who used rock layers from the Paris Basin to define it. These rocks contained large amounts of chalk, which led him to name the period after this material. Later, in 1822, geologists Conybeare and Phillips divided the period into two main sections. In 1840, another geologist, Alcide d'Orbigny, took it further by breaking the French Cretaceous into 5 stages: Neocomian, Aptian, Albian, Turonian, and Senonian, with some added divisions later on. The Cretaceous period is divided into 2 main parts: the Early Cretaceous and the Late Cretaceous. These are also known as the Lower and Upper Cretaceous. In older studies, the Cretaceous was sometimes split into 3 parts: the Neocomian, Early Cretaceous, the Gallic, Middle Cretaceous, and the Senonian, Late Cretaceous. Today, the Cretaceous is broken down into 12 stages, a system that comes from Europe but is now used around the world. However, in some areas, different local divisions are still used. The beginning of the Cretaceous period remains unclear, and it's the only major boundary in the geological timescale that has not been officially defined with a global boundary stratotype section and point, GSSP. Determining this boundary has been challenging because many markers that could help define it are regional and not consistent worldwide. There's also a lack of major events like sudden shifts in isotope ratios that could be used to establish the boundary. One potential candidate for marking the start of the Cretaceous is a group of planktonic organisms called calpionellids, which appeared in the late Jurassic and early Cretaceous. The appearance of one specific type, Calpionella alpina, has been suggested as the point that could mark the start of the Cretaceous. Another possible marker is the first appearance of the ammonite Strambergella jacobi. However, this is controversial, as it doesn't align with the appearance of Calpionella alpina. For now, the boundary is officially thought to be around 145 million years ago, though some studies suggest it could have been as recent as 140 million years ago. The upper boundary of the Cretaceous is much clearer and is marked by a layer rich in iridium, found around the world. This layer is linked to the impact of a giant asteroid, which is believed to have hit the Earth near the Yucatan Peninsula and the Gulf of Mexico. This impact, which occurred about 66 million years ago, is famously associated with the mass extinction event at the end of the Cretaceous. At the end of the Cretaceous, a massive impact may have been the final blow to the ongoing decline in life during the Maastrichtian Age, causing the extinction of about 75% of all plant and animal species. This event, known as the KPG boundary, formerly the KT boundary, marked a dramatic shift in Earth's ecosystems. The recovery from this extinction took a long time, even though there were many vacant ecological niches available for new species to fill. Despite the devastating nature of this extinction event, not all groups of animals were affected in the same way. Some species, particularly those that relied on photosynthesis, struggled as the atmosphere filled with particles that blocked out sunlight. This disrupted the entire food chain, starting with the plants and plankton that photosynthesize. Herbivores, which relied on plants and plankton, also died off, and the top predators, such as Tyrannosaurus rex, followed suit. However, only 3 major groups of large animals went completely extinct: non-avian dinosaurs, plesiosaurs, and pterosaurs. Other groups, like ichthyosaurs and certain types of ancient reptiles, had already disappeared millions of years before the impact event. The impact also caused massive losses among smaller creatures, including coccolithophorids, mollusks like ammonites and rudists, and freshwater creatures like snails and mussels. Many of these species were part of the food chain for larger animals, such as the giant marine lizards called mosasaurs, which also went extinct as a result of the catastrophic changes to their environment. After the extinction event, certain types of animals managed to survive, likely because their food sources became more abundant. Among these survivors were omnivores, animals that eat both plants and animals, insectivores, animals that feed on insects, and carrion eaters, animals that eat dead animals. Interestingly, at the end of the Cretaceous period, there seemed to be no mammals that were purely herbivores or carnivores. Instead, mammals and birds that made it through the extinction event mostly fed on insects, larvae, worms, and snails. These creatures, in turn, fed on decaying plant and animal matter. Scientists believe these organisms survived the collapse of plant-based food chains by feeding on this detritus, which allowed them to thrive in an environment where plants and larger animals were struggling. In river ecosystems, few animal groups went extinct. This was because these communities didn't rely heavily on living plants for food. Instead, they depended more on detritus, decaying matter from land, that washed into the streams. This gave them a kind of ecological cushion that helped protect them from the effects of the extinction event. A similar but more complicated pattern was found in the oceans. The extinction was harsher for animals living in the water column, the open water above the seafloor, than for those living on or on the seafloor. Animals in the water column mostly depended on living phytoplankton, while those on the ocean floor could feed on detritus or even switch to eating detritus if needed. The biggest survivors of the extinction event were crocodilians and champsosaurs, large air-breathing reptiles that lived partly in water. These creatures had access to detritus, which helped them survive. Modern crocodiles, for example, can live for months without food by scavenging and entering a state of hibernation when conditions are tough. Their young are small, grow slowly, and feed on invertebrates or dead creatures for their first few years. These traits have been linked to the crocodilian family's survival during the Cretaceous extinction. During the Cretaceous, the supercontinent of Pangaea finally broke apart into the continents we recognize today, though their positions were quite different from where they are now. As the Atlantic Ocean widened, mountains continued to form along the edges of the North American continent. In the southern hemisphere, the breakup of Gondwana accelerated, leading to the separation of South America, Antarctica, and Australia from Africa. This also created the South Atlantic and Indian Oceans. The breakups raised underwater mountain chains and caused sea levels to rise worldwide. To the north of Africa, the Tethys Sea continued to shrink, and by the late Cretaceous, North America was divided by a large inland sea called the Western Interior Seaway. This sea separated the regions of Laramidia in the west and Appalachia in the east. As the sea retreated in the final part of the Cretaceous, it left behind thick marine deposits between layers of coal. Elsewhere, Africa was split by a shallow sea during the Coniacian and Santonian stages, connecting the Tethys Sea with the South Atlantic through the Central Sahara and Central Africa, which were submerged at the time. Another shallow sea connected what is now Norway and Greenland with the Arctic Ocean, allowing for the exchange of life between the two oceans. At the height of the Cretaceous transgression, about a third of Earth's land area was submerged underwater. The Cretaceous is also well known for the large amounts of chalk that formed during this period, more than at any other time in Earth's history. The ocean's calcium levels were enriched due to mid-ocean ridge activity, which made it easier for tiny plankton to form calcium-rich shells. This created vast deposits of carbonates and other sedimentary materials that we now find in Cretaceous rock formations. Some famous examples of these deposits include the Smoky Hill Chalk Member in Kansas, known for its rich marine fossils, and the Hell Creek Formation, known for its terrestrial fossils. In what is now India, huge lava flows called the Deccan Traps erupted during the late Cretaceous and early Paleocene, marking another dramatic event in Earth's geological history. Herbivorous dinosaurs were a fascinating group, and some of the most well-known ones were truly remarkable in their size and abilities. One of the most iconic was the massive sauropods, with their long necks and enormous bodies. These giants were perfectly built to reach the highest branches of trees, feeding on foliage that other creatures couldn't access. Despite their great size, they had small, peg-like teeth, ideal for crushing tough plant material, allowing them to consume vast amounts of vegetation to fuel their enormous bodies. But not all herbivorous dinosaurs were giants like the sauropods. For instance, the Stegosaurus, which roamed the Earth during the Late Jurassic period, was much smaller in comparison. This dinosaur had a distinctive look, with rows of bony plates along its back and sharp spikes on its tail. These features likely served as a defense mechanism, protecting it from predators. Interestingly, scientists believe the Stegosaurus had an unusually small brain, about the size of a pea, located at the base of its spine. Its eyes, positioned on the top of its head, may have given it a broad view of its surroundings, helping it spot predators from all directions. Some herbivores were even smaller and more agile. Take the Heterodontosaurus, for example. This small bipedal dinosaur lived during the early Jurassic period. Its compact body and strong legs made it fast and nimble, able to hide in thick vegetation to avoid danger. With a unique set of teeth, both sharp for cutting and flat for grinding, this dinosaur was able to eat a wide variety of food, from plants to insects, making it an opportunistic feeder. Then there were the ceratopsians, another group of large herbivorous dinosaurs that were well adapted to life on land. Some of their fossils date back to the Cretaceous period, showing that they survived the catastrophic events that marked the end of the dinosaurs' reign. These dinosaurs had sturdy legs, thick, armored bodies, and often sported elaborate horns and head ornaments. These features were likely used for defense, to intimidate rivals, or to establish dominance within their herds. Herbivorous dinosaurs played a crucial role in their ecosystems. As they moved through the environment, they spread seeds and fertilized the soil with their droppings, helping new plants to grow and maintaining the health of their habitats. At the same time, they were a vital food source for carnivorous dinosaurs, who relied on them for survival. Now that we've looked at the plant eaters, let's turn our attention to the next group of dinosaurs, those that could afford to eat other dinosaurs. Carnivorous dinosaurs, particularly those from the Triassic period, were a fascinating group of creatures. One of the most famous families of meat-eating dinosaurs was the theropods, which included well-known species like Eoraptor and Dilophosaurus. These dinosaurs were mostly carnivores or omnivores, meaning they ate either meat or plants, and they were equipped with long, sharp teeth and strong, agile bodies that made them excellent hunters. Many theropods also had hands with sharp claws, perfect for grabbing and killing their prey. Among the largest and most fearsome theropods were the Tyrannosauridae, a family of giant predators at the top of their food chain. The biggest of them all was Tyrannosaurus rex, one of the largest land predators ever known. It could grow up to 40 feet long and weigh between 8 and 14 tons. In contrast, the Allosaurus was also a large, meat-eating dinosaur with powerful jaws, though not as strong as the Tyrannosaurus rex. Some Allosaurus species stood out because of their crests, such as the Acrocanthosaurus, which had distinct ridges on its head and back. Some theropods adapted to life in the air. Dinosaurs like Thechodontosaurus evolved wings, which allowed them to fly and hunt from the skies, offering them a unique advantage in catching prey. On the other hand, there were smaller, agile hunters like Herrerasaurus, which lived in the early Jurassic period. At about 13 feet long, these dinosaurs would prey on smaller creatures, often waiting near bodies of water or scavenging leftovers from larger predators. The danger wasn't only present on the land, though. Carnivorous dinosaurs also ruled the waters. Phytosaurs, a group of aquatic dinosaurs, lived in rivers and swamps. These creatures had long, narrow snouts and sharp teeth, making them ideal for catching fish and small aquatic animals. Although they looked similar to modern crocodiles, they were not closely related. When it rained, small rivers and lakes would expand, drawing in a variety of creatures. This is when Spinosaurus family members who lived near these water sources came into play. They also had long, narrow snouts and sharp teeth for catching fish, but unlike the phytosaurs, their bodies were built differently, and many had large spiny ridges on their backs, resembling sails. It's still unclear exactly why these creatures had such crests, but some scientists think they could have been used for attracting mates or providing protection. Carnivorous dinosaurs played an essential role in maintaining a balanced ecosystem by controlling the populations of herbivorous dinosaurs and other animals. This helped keep the environment stable, ensuring the survival of many species over millions of years. Our third stop takes us to the fascinating world of omnivorous dinosaurs. These creatures were able to adapt to a diet that included both plants and animals, giving them the advantage of a wide range of food sources in their environment. One of the most well-known groups of omnivores during the Triassic period, Dinosaurs and Drosa. These dinosaurs were typically small, about the size of a dog, and had a mix of sharp cutting teeth and flatter grinding teeth. This unique combination of teeth allowed them to feed on a wide variety of foods, making them more adaptable to changing environments. Due to the many predators around, some species had to find new ways to survive. One such adaptation was seen in the Anasaurus, which took to burrowing underground. This species had tough, armored plates covering its body to protect it from predators. Its short, stocky legs were perfect for digging, and interestingly, it had a club-shaped tail that could have been used for defense. Small bipedal dinosaurs from the Sauropods family, which lived during the Late Triassic and early Jurassic periods, were also burrowers. With their sharp claws and powerful muscles, they likely dug tunnels and created underground hideouts. These burrows would not only have helped them escape from predators, but also shielded them from the harsh weather conditions that often ravaged their world. These clever adaptations helped ensure their survival in a challenging and dangerous environment. During the Triassic period, some dinosaurs adapted to life in the trees, much like modern birds. One of the most famous tree-dwelling dinosaurs from this time was Drepanosaurus. These small, agile dinosaurs were only about 20 inches long and lived throughout the Late Triassic and early Jurassic periods. With their long, slender bodies and short, powerful legs, Drepanosaurus was perfectly built for climbing and moving through the trees. They had a unique skeleton that allowed them to move their arms and legs in a way similar to how modern birds do. What made Drepanosaurus even more fascinating were its strange, almost chameleon-like features. Its sharp claws and strong muscles helped it scale trees and move along branches in search of food and shelter, living high above the ground in a world of leaves and branches. Another group of tree-dwelling dinosaurs was the Scansoriopteryx. These small, feathered dinosaurs lived during the Late Jurassic period and had long, flexible tails that helped them maintain balance while climbing and navigating through trees. In addition to their tails, they had long, slender fingers with sharp claws, which allowed them to cling to branches and other objects. Some scientists believe that Scansoriopteryx may have even been capable of gliding from tree to tree, suggesting that flight didn't necessarily evolve from ground-dwelling dinosaurs that learned to fly. Instead, it could have developed in a top-down fashion where certain ancient archosaurs dinosaurs with feathers learned to glide before evolving into true flight. As life blossomed on land, it also thrived in the waters. Aquatic dinosaurs adapted to life in the water, flourishing in various aquatic environments, from shallow rivers and swamps to the deep ocean. One of the most famous aquatic dinosaurs from the Triassic period was the Ichthyosaurus, a marine reptile that resembled modern-day dolphins. With sleek, streamlined bodies, flippers, and a dorsal fin, Ichthyosaurs were perfectly built for swimming and hunting in the open ocean. Their sharp teeth suggest they were predators, likely feeding on a mix of fish and other marine creatures. The Ichthyosaurs shared the seas with a group called the Sauropterygians, a diverse family of marine reptiles that came in many shapes and sizes. Some were small and quick, while others were large, slow-moving predators. The Sauropterygians had an interesting respiratory system that allowed them to breathe underwater by using gills. Some species, like the Plesiosaurus, had complex gills with small supporting bones, while others, like the Nothosaurus, had simpler gills supported by their throat walls. This special adaptation made it possible for these reptiles to spend most of their time in the ocean, where they could easily find abundant food sources. Another group of impressive aquatic dinosaurs from the Triassic period was the Plesiosaurs. These marine reptiles had long necks, short tails, and large paddle-like limbs. Some of these giants grew as large as 65 feet long. Plesiosaurs were excellent swimmers, which made them efficient hunters in the water. Larger species fed on a variety of marine reptiles, including other plesiosaurs, sharks, and other large creatures. Some plesiosaurs even caught flying reptiles. One long-necked plesiosaurus discovered by paleontologists had its last meal preserved in its stomach, which included the remains of a flying lizard, fish bones, and an ammonite shell. Plesiosaurs shared the seas with smaller reptiles like the Thesaurus, which lived during the Late Triassic and early Jurassic periods. These creatures were similar in body shape, with long, slender bodies and paddle-like limbs, though they only reached about 10 feet in length. Thesaurus were likely predators, hunting small marine animals like fish and other creatures. What made them stand out was their unique hunting technique. They used their long, flexible necks to strike at prey from a distance, using sharp teeth to grasp and hold their catch. There were also semi-aquatic reptiles like the Nothosaurus, which lived during the Late Triassic and early Jurassic periods. The Nothosaurus had a long, flexible body and webbed limbs, which allowed it to move easily both on land and in the water. This made it especially well-suited for navigating and hunting in shallow waters. Its small, sharp teeth were arranged in a pattern that helped it filter out tiny prey from the water. The variety of dinosaurs during the Triassic period was truly remarkable. The different species had a wide range of physical adaptations that allowed them to thrive in various environments, from the shallowest waters to the deep ocean.